All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to Masterfully Integrated. I'm here with Janine. And today we are going to wrap up the book, Indistractible. We're going to go over part 6 and 7. And part 6 is about how to raise indestructible children. And part 7 is about indestructible relationships, how to have them. So we're going to talk about the children in the way that it applies to, dealing with people. And although we don't think that all people are children, a lot of the concepts that he discussed in the book apply to just human beings in general, not just children. So we aren't going to tell you how to raise your kids, but we're just going to discuss some of the points that we found fascinating and how we use them in management of people. So before we get started, I'm just going to make sure that we're actually live and that it's working. So just give me 1 second. If you are watching live, let us know in the comments that you're watching. If you have any questions as we start talking or, thoughts on what we're discussing, feel free to put them there and we will be sure to respond. And if you haven't gotten the book yet, we highly recommend it. It is awesome. Hold on 1 second.
Yep. So the book is by Nir Eyal. It's Nir, and last name is Eyal. It's a fairly unusual name, but easy to find if you can spell it right.
Yeah. And just, I can't express how much I think this book is so awesome. I highly recommend it. I mean, I know we both do. So again, if you're watching the replay, again, if you have comments or questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Give us the hashtag replay. We also put this on our YouTube channel if you'd prefer to watch it there. I did get a comment from someone that they prefer that because they can put it, they can speed it up.
Yes.
And I thought I talked too fast, but maybe, maybe not. But all right, so let's start with some of the things that we pulled out of the book that we thought were important. So the first one was to the don't deflect and blame. So when there's a situation where maybe you notice your employees or your team members are, what we used to call in the Navy, coking and joking, like sitting around, not really doing anything, or not being productive. The first thing you should do is reflect on what you've given them to do versus looking at them and saying, what are they doing wrong? Because if they don't have anything to do, it might most likely not be their fault. It's that they haven't been delegated enough or they don't have the right instructions. And so they're then filling their time by being distracted by something else. If they had, inherently people want to do well and they want to do a good job. So if they're filling their time by being distracted, it's most likely because they don't have anything to do or they're bored and they're not being engaged. And so the first place to look is probably at yourself as the manager or the head of the team, right?
Yep. And the reason why we were going over this, the children and then to the workplace thing, is because it's really the same principles apply to parenting or business. It's really lead by example. They see what you do and they're going to follow it. So if you're being distracted, but for, a practical purpose is like if you're familiar, parents, with the busy bag, right, that you bring to church or you bring along with you. Usually it's part of the diaper bag when they're really small and then gets bigger. But I mean, the mom purse is a real thing with the extra dimensions in it. You're always pulling something out for the kids when you have those little slow times when you're out and about. And it's the same thing in the business place. We'd have a priority system on projects. So when we have a hot project, everyone's focused on, they're working on it, but the different team members, the time that it takes for them to do their respective jobs can vary. So we also have low priority things that, hey, when you don't have a high priority thing going on, here's your default low priority thing that you can go to. So your time's always being occupied and they know what to do.
Yeah. And it's oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, back to the Navy example. In the Army, we called it pocket training, where we always had something literally in one of our cargo pockets, because in that venue, we're often outside, right? We're off somewhere. We're not necessarily in an office or in a building or in our homes and around our things. So we literally always kept something in our pockets to turn around. If it's an NCO, they could pull it out and turn around and work with their enlisted members with, or an officer, the same thing. And enlisted people who are training up into leadership, they're expected to have something in their pocket to occupy themselves all on their own. So it's all the way up and down the chain.
Yeah. And so that's a matter of just creating a list, like an ongoing list of things that, and, it might help to ask those people, what are some projects that you would like to work on? What are some things that maybe we're missing that you think are important? And let them take the lead on it. Let them be empowered to come up with those things. And then, that will then provide them engagement and something to occupy their time and be productive versus, finding some way to fill it. So that's important. So the next one is autonomy. So the I didn't
Well,
say
you
the
really
page
just
of
touched
the
on the
actual
autonomy and them being able to choose the things that they want to work
right.
on or improve upon.
Right. And so that goes back to something we've discussed before about delegating. And when you delegate not just the task itself, but you delegate the problem solving, the decision making, and empowering them with the responsibility of those things and the power to make choices and do those things. And, when you're in a tasking situation, the person's constantly coming back to, okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And giving them the power to, here's the task, here's the resources you need, you have the response, you can make decisions, just, let me know when it's done. Give them the guidelines that you want to provide or the standard operating procedure to follow, and then you give them the power to do that. And you also empower them to say, if this isn't the best way to do it, find a better way and tell me what that is. And that gives them the motivation to want to do it versus just like, okay, task done. Okay, now what? Task done. What's next? And so I think that's really important. And how he related it to kids was like giving them the power to make the decisions and empowering them to make choices and things like that about their screen time. That was what he was referring to, and bringing them in on the conversation about, okay, what's the goal? And okay, so how much time do you want to spend watching TV or playing a video game or something? And then how much time do you want to spend working towards this goal and gaining traction? So that was how he related it to kids, but it's very similar in a working environment when you're managing people as well.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid that trap of them coming to you, what's next all the time. So that taking this to that next level is, remember that you're teaching them this process as well, whether it's children or in the workplace, the corporate culture. So not, you don't want to train them to come to you for the list to select from, right? You're training them to start working through okay, what are the priorities? So there's a point where they don't have to ask those questions. They know what to come from. And you can do those at all different levels. We have a client who has low priority tasks set up like a marketplace. So people on the team can pick and choose the things that they most want to do, because they're all low priority, but they want people interested in what they're doing. I had a spring break with 4 college boys hanging out in my living room who were just there to relax. And so my husband and I took a list of some big projects around the house we wanted done. We tied a cash value to them. We put it all up on the fridge and told the boys, like, guys, you don't have to do anything, but if you feel like doing something, and the actual cash was posted to the fridge right in front of their faces every time they went to the fridge, which college boys do an awful lot, right? And so, and one of them was like, y'all are all over this, and he just started jobbing out. And then after a couple days of eating and resting, the other boys just got bored, and sure enough, I think every single thing but one got done by the end of the week. And we had no expectation for them to do anything, but it worked out and everybody was happy. So there's all kinds of different ways you can do it.
Yeah. So the next one is strive for competence. So, kids and adults alike, want to do better, be better. They want to strive for more. And, if an employee isn't doing well at work, if there's something going on and they're using their time and they're allowing themselves to be distracted, it would be to your benefit as the manager or the parent to find out what that the core of the problem is. It might not have anything to do with work. It might be personal, and they're using their phone or social media to fill a void of something. Something he talked about in the books with kids is they use screen time to fill a void of connection, or they fill it, having that friendship circles or things like that. And so although they're spending time on the screen, they're finding that thing that they're missing or wanting by being on social media, playing video games, or, things like that. Like I gave the example of my brother. He used to play a video game that he would had a headset where he talked to people. And I used to think, I thought it was weird. I'm like, who can just sit and play video games like that? Because I never really could. It's not really my thing. But when you really look at it, I mean, that was his friend circle. That's who, it was just the same as me going over to someone's house or my friends coming together and us having a group. It was the same thing. They just had a video game, a platform that they used. So in a management position, if you're seeing that one of your team members is struggling, and they're getting distracted at work, they're not being as productive, it would behoove you to figure out what the core of that problem is. What's happening? Is it that they're unhappy in the position that they're in, and so it's painful and they just don't want to do it? I know, when I have something on my list that I don't really want to do, I will find anything else to distract me from doing what I need to get done. I mean, and your team members are just the same, right? So they're the same way. So what's the problem? Is it that they're not happy in the position? Do they want to do another position at the company or on the team? Or is it something more than that? Is it something deeper? Is it something at home that they're distracted by? And so then being on social media or, watching YouTube videos or something is fulfilling something that's missing that they're feeling.
Yep. And that's actually two of the points in here. The first one was competence and the second one was relatedness. And those tie together. Once you have more than one person on your team, that's really, it becomes more complex in the level of, from the competence point of view, it's people want to get better at stuff and be good at stuff. And you as the leader, when you're interacting with them, when somebody's learning something, you're doing a lot of correction. And that can just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing anything right. So something I actually learned really early in life as a swim instructor, when somebody starts out learning how to swim, they don't do anything right, was always compliment them on something.
Yeah, right? Whatever something it is that you can find,
or done good on. And in a team environment, it's so that's good for the individual, and so it sets them up in a positive way to be okay, so now I'm to master this next little part of this whole thing. But in doing it in front of a team and recognizing that, I know everyone's seen this, where it's if there's someone who seems to not be doing well, people step away. They don't want to be connected or associated with the person who's struggling, whether it's conscious or not.
But then that person's standing alone, and then they're not feeling any kind of support.
Right. And so these two things for competence and relatedness are super important in how they're tied together in the workplace. If you're recognizing their efforts and where they're doing good, then everyone else starts rooting for them, because people also like the underdog, and they want that person on the team that's working so hard to get better at something. It can snowball in a really positive direction if you put those two together.
And the relatedness, I think, is important, because this goes back to something we discussed in one of the other parts about having a safe place to be able to talk about issues that come up in the workplace. So if someone's having a problem and they feel like they're the only person having that problem, they start to, not even on purpose, but start to separate themselves and give distance, because they feel like, oh, I must be the only person that's feeling like this. But if they have a safe place where they can have a conversation and they know that there's not going to be any retribution for coming out about listen, this isn't working for me. This is what I'm noticing. Here's what I think is the solution. And they can have a good, effective conversation with especially the leaders, but also the other employees or team members. That's a way that they can then relate, because someone else can say, I feel the same way, but they never would have known it if they were afraid to speak out about it. And so, but people will just inherently, they'll just start to distance themselves if they feel like they're the only person that feels like that. They'll just sort of isolate themselves because they don't think anyone else can relate to the problem. But if they have a place where, the leaders are sitting down with the team and they're discussing what's not working, what's the solution? And there's an effective way that people can speak openly and not be afraid of it coming back on them, to actually come up with a solution to the problem. people will relate more to each other. They're going to feel accepted. They're going to feel like they matter, and that's going to turn around and make their them work better. They're going to be working in a more open environment. They're going to want to be better, do better, all those things, if they feel them. And something I should have said in the very beginning was that all of these things start with the leaders bringing the team in and having the team understand what's the goal, what's the mission, how does everyone fit into the big picture, what's everyone's thing that they're responsible for, like what that empowers them. Okay, this is your role, this is what you are responsible for, and we are relying on you to do this. This is yours, and giving them that, but still understanding how it fits in the big picture. If everyone's just off working on their own in their own little blinders on and doing that, it can feel very alone. They might not understand how it fits in with everyone else, and you don't have the relatedness, you don't have the communication and things like that. So I think it starts with that, and then all of these things. If you're noticing that people aren't being as productive, if they're getting distracted, if they're on their phones, if they're sitting around not doing anything, when you're like, well, they have tons of stuff to do, why aren't they doing it? Well, do they know that? So there's a lot that goes into that, but it always starts with the leaders. It always starts with the leaders. It starts from the top down, setting an example. A lot of these things then also relate to the time blocking, the delegating appropriately, making sure that they have what they need to do the job, and they understand the expectations and what responsibilities they have, and that they're empowered to make choices, and they have a place where that they can be open about any issues that are coming up, and come up with a solution as a team. And your expectation for them is that they do strive to be better, and you provide them opportunities to do better, and all of those things. And it ultimately starts with the leader, whatever that manager or the owner, whatever level in the org chart you are.
Yeah, and it can look different ways. We deal with a lot of remote teams, and everyone's been dealing with a lot of remote teams lately. And Slack is a primary channel we use. There we have the different sub teams have their own channel, and then there's also direct messages. So as a leader, when you have someone, very often people do the direct message for that question because they don't want to ask it in front of the group. So what you can do is turn around to the team channel and say, hey, so-and-so asked a fantastic question, and I want to share the answer with everyone. So, you're recognizing them for stepping forward and asking, you're putting the information out to the whole team, and you're making it, and then you'll start seeing more people chiming. I see this actually over this past week happen in one of ours, where we have a person who very actively asks questions, and very often team members will chime in with, oh, I'm really glad you asked that, or, oh, that's awesome, I didn't even think of that. So
right, or they were having the same problem or something.
Yep. And then even at big company levels, and while this quarantine has been going on, there's so much uncertainty for big teams or big companies. Gary Kelly, the CEO of Southwest, has been putting out a video several times a week and almost every day for a little while when things were really uncertain. And the format was answering the most common questions that were coming in from everyone in the entire Southwest company, which is huge. And so because of course everyone wants to know, are we going to be okay? What's going on? How are we going to, from the logistical things of how rapidly the dynamics of their business changed from one day to the next as everything got shut down, to looking forward to the future. How are these things going to be managed? So it's all the way around leadership by example and communicating with your team.
Yeah, exactly. And asking for feedback. I think that's a big thing, that we as leaders sometimes think that we know best, and sometimes we just don't, and it's important to, humble yourself and ask for feedback. Like, how can we be doing this better, and being open to hearing it. And, just kind of, if they give something and say, okay, well, let's try it, but and not just shutting them down. And why do you think that that's a better way of doing it? So that way you can understand and then, implement it. And so I think that's important, is just being open to feedback if something isn't working.
And that's addressed in Indistractable with the kids about involving them in that kind of thing. And in both cases, there's an art between the balance of people involved in bringing ideas and decision making and not letting the tail wag the dog, right? The kids don't run the household, the employees don't drive the direction of the vision of the company, and yet the more engaged you get with them around their sphere of influence, they're more engaged, they feel more worth, they feel, it's like they're happier people because this is what they do for a living, is a significant part of their life, and they want to live worthwhile lives.
Yep. Okay, so let's move to the relationship section. So we're going to relate this again back to business, because obviously there's lots of relationships in business. So one of the things that he talks about is having commitments with your significant other, but we think that it can be applied in business as well. Something that we do and we set up for clients is a schedule of meetings. So starting with the annual, to the quarterly, to the monthly, to the weekly, to the daily. And one of the things that we do in our weekly meetings is set up those goals that we want to accomplish by the end of the week. And so what that looks like is a commitment. It's a pact that you're going to achieve these things by the end of the week. And so that relates them back to how he had talked about pacts, like setting pacts. He mentioned the one with the money and those kinds of things, but this one is your time commitment or your task, like what you're going to get done by the end of the week. And that's important. He relates it to having a commitment or pact with your significant other, of like, okay, at this time, we're gonna, no electronic devices after, whatever, 9 p.m. or something. And, whatever that looks like. But similarly, that can be applied to the workplace or on a team or even remotely, saying, okay, the meetings that we're going to have are at this time, and we expect you to be there and ready with, whatever, and setting that expectation of what needs to be prepared for the meeting. Okay. And then you're going to tell us what you're going to work on during the week. So by Friday that gets completed, or by Monday you review it and say, okay, these are the things that got complete. I think that's really important, and it applies in all relationships, even friendships, whatever that you set with someone else.
Yeah. And I break that down all the way, from a week of tasks down to an individual thing. I mean, the whole premise of Indistractable is that you are focused and that you are present in the moment around whatever it is, around it. If it's your special time with your person, if you're interacting with the customer, if you're making your pact with your team members, those are all, fundamentally human relationships need to be addressed the same way. And we see that everywhere. It's like my latest trend, all the chat windows that you find online with businesses, and you get on there and ask a question, and there's a 3-minute pause before an answer, and then you answer it, and then there's another 2-minute pause. And I have to say, there's a couple times where, hey, buddy, I feel like I'm talking to my ex-husband here. Answer me, get engaged, focus on this conversation, or don't answer because I was in the queue. Leave me in the queue until you can focus on me, because there's no way. And then from the business point of view, it's like your customer service people are giving crappy, experience to your users, and they're not focusing on what they're doing. So they're serving 3 or 4 people badly instead of every single one well, in order, if they would stay focused. And so it works the same way in a relationship. Like, kids know when they're being blown off, spouses know when they're being blown off. It's like,
and then one of the other things he mentioned in this chapter was about the phones, and he was specifically talking about like relationships with friends. And let's say you're out to dinner and someone gets their phone out and you're talking, and a way to kind of call attention to the fact that they're being kind of rude is to say, oh, I see you're on your phone. Is everything okay? And I think this applies in all situations, work, I know we talked about this before because there was another part in the book where he talks about meetings, and like, even though we're on a video call and I can't physically see Janine's full body, like I could tell if she's distracted. Like she can tell if I'm distracted. If I'm looking away, she can tell that, and it can make it an uncomfortable thing. And
Yeah. Do we all recognize this?
right. Yeah. Or
Mm-hmm.
even like the eyes
Mm-hmm.
like moving
Yeah.
across the screen, like, I mean, we can see it. So and just being fully present with people, I think, is important. And especially leaders being fully present with their team when they're having, let's say they're having a tough discussion about something that isn't working, or someone's bringing up, something negative. And I mean, being fully present in that moment when that person is talking about it, because they're being vulnerable, they're allowing the rest of the team and the leaders to hear what they have to say. There's probably some fear that it's going to come back on them negatively, that they're bringing this up. So especially in situations like that, counselings, when you're doing one-on-one counselings, like being present and just being aware of that, you're attentive to what's going on. And in his situation, it was more of a friend sitting down to dinner kind of thing, and just saying, it's being rude that you're looking at your phone. I mean, I just can't tell you how many times, like being in a restaurant or something, and all four people, whether it's four adults, two adults and two kids, they're all on their phones and stuff. And I just think, wow, like I don't know, personally, when I'm out with someone, I make a point of putting my phone away. I don't look at it unless I know something's coming in, then I'll let that person know ahead of time, hey, I'm waiting for a call or something like that. But I mean, I just think about just how like how crazy it is. They're all sitting at a table, but they're so distant because they're looking at their phone while they're there. I don't know, but
I felt the same way about movie theaters, actually, right? Because you're just in a room with a whole bunch of people, but everyone's looking at that. They're not engaging with each other. So it was a
yeah.
weird social but not kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important just with clients, when you're on the phone with clients, but particularly when it's a vulnerable situation with like a team member or a client, like if the client has a complaint, it's super easy because it's painful to have to hear the complaint from the client or the team member. It'd be super easy to like pick your phone up and want to get distracted because you don't want to hear the painful message that they have to pass. But it's really important to be attentive in those moments.
Well, yeah, and problems do happen. And the thing that'll mollify someone the most is if they know that you're going to be communicative with them. And in order to
Yeah.
be communicative, you have to be aware of what's going on and be engaged. And you can turn that complaint around into the best testimonial or feedback or recurring customer in how you
Yeah.
handle that. Problems happen and people know that, but nobody likes getting blown off or delayed or ghosted or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's it. Janine, did you have any other points you wanted to make from the book?
No, just the thing that the kids to the business place is like people of every age are always growing. And as a leader, it's our job to nurture them at whatever level they're at in any place that we can.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And to recognize that we set the example, and be okay if you make a mistake and just change it, admit that you made a mistake and move on. So if you're getting distracted and you recognize it, make the change so that you aren't, if you can become indistractable, the people that work for you can also become indistractable if you set the example for it, and I think that's really important. And the same goes for your household too, people in your household, your friends, whatever. Anyway, we highly recommend this book. I think it's awesome. He's got really great resources on his website. And if
lots of practical tips in this book, it's
yeah,
not just
yep.
theoretical.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have any questions about it, or you get the book and you want to, and you want to give us some feedback or whatever, feel free to put in the comments. Feel free to message us as well. If you're looking for support to set this up or figure out how you can become more indistractable, if you need support on how to take action on some of these things, feel free to book one of our 15-minute calls, and we'll have a conversation with you. And if you want to continue to work with us, we can provide you with options of what that might look like. We'll put the link in the comments for the 15-minute call, and the link to buy the book as well. We're not an affiliate, so it's there for you. And yeah, so we will see you next Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We really appreciate you being here with us. And again, if you watch the replay, give us a hashtag replay, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.